Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Citizen Sleeper. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. It's where I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game. That's the Steam refund window. Steam says that you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and broadly speaking, I would agree as a rule and say that 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video, broad strokes info, keep it around 10 minutes, and you can make up your mind on your own. So my motivation here is Citizen Sleeper 2 is around the corner. In fact, I'm sitting on it. I have nothing to say, I haven't installed it, but I thought, hey, why not check the first one out first, see what it's all about. So initial thoughts, there's something interesting here, and full marks for being kind of original, unusual. The gameplay loop is light, but still there and kind of original. This sort of dice management, passing tasks day by day, a bit of a risk reward component. So survival super light, I suppose you could call it, mixed in with what is ultimately a visual novel. I don't necessarily want to say it's in disguise, but like as someone who is kind of allergic to visual novels because I struggle to defend them as a game, right? Especially the ones that are just a click-through PowerPoint simulator, probably don't deserve to be on Steam if they're not a game in the first place. So this is somewhere in between. Light gameplay and a story going on. It's moving at a very slow pace, but it is deliberate, as opposed to something that would be called perhaps bloated or meandering. So it's definitely what you would call an intentional slow burn. However, that's not going to necessarily make you like a slow burn just because that's the intent. So there is very much a mood component to this, very vaporwave, 80s futurism, Vangelis style Blade Runner music. In fact, it's got a bit of a Blade Runner mouthfeel. It does obviously have a bit of a different art style, which I quite like. I think it's very blocky and has a colourful futurism to it. Broadly speaking, there is like a cool little game here and definitely a mood piece, right? And again, this is to inform, not to scare people away or anything like that. Some people will just lap this up and be sold on it. I think most, it's going to depend on the day of the week, or more specifically where they're at in life. Thematically, you are a sleeper, and again, it's still early days, so I've only got bits and pieces. It's doing well at tying it together in a sort of compelling breadcrumb way. Like, I'm finding some of the writing is a little bit masturbatory is a term that I like to use. It's vague and strange, but I think most people understand it. It's a little bit self-indulgent. But having said that, it doesn't go all in on that. It has the sort of breadcrumb trail of trying to survive as what is ultimately sort of a slave broken out on the run. As a sleeper, you are a rarity, at least in this location. You're sort of on a bit of backwater salvage station, bit of a halfway house for lower rungs, let's say. So that kind of makes you a bit of a novelty in that, as I understand it so far, you're someone who's essentially sold their body in a sort of, let's call it corporate futurism setting. And it's not super clear, but they refer to you often as an emulation, but it would seem that your consciousness is copy-pasted into this robot body, and then off you go. And your character sort of reflects and laments about signing over the deed to their body. So it's interesting. And underpinning all of that, you sort of broken up and busted because you've kind of done a jailbreak, which in and of itself is interesting. A lot of people tend to brush over that sort of thing. It is indentured servitude. You did sign the waiver, and yet you're breaking out. But, we'll brush over this, much like most writers do themselves. But you've essentially got a busted up body, and it's designed with, essentially, you got to drink the bloody baby food that's specific for your body or it'll shut down. So this creates 2 layers of survival mechanic, in that you've kind of got hunger in general. You still have to eat and feed your body, but you also have to take the magic MacGuffin syrup that will stop you from permadeathing. So it's interesting. It's flirting with some transhumanism, I suppose. Corporation bad is a theme that's a bit tired with this sort of corporate futurism setting, but at the same time, and again, it's still early hours, you never know, it might drop some nonsense on me, but in the early going, as far as all things considered, it's fairly even-handed with its commentary around this sort of stuff and focusing more on your character, focusing on surviving and trying to flourish in this environment. So you've essentially managed to escape in this container into a backwater. You've done a handshake deal with the dude that found you, so you've got somewhere to sleep. And you move around this ring trying to figure out, well, am I going to make friends with the local doctor? Figure out how to eat, earn income, that sort of stuff. And these little activities, you slot a dice. Each pip is explained in tutorial, not super well, to be perfectly honest. People are going to forget what pip does what. But when you slot them in the activity before you press go, it will print out 25% of a negative effect chance, that sort of thing. So it works well enough. But the dice thing seems, more sort of aesthetic than actually sort of helpful. I guess it's rolled at the beginning of the day to see what you get. But 6 doesn't really mean 6. Not in any sort of way that you would associate with a die. But yeah, look, all in all, it seems pretty okay. And I will probably check out the sequel. I've heard it kind of stands alone, totally separate. I'd be curious where that setting goes. But look, here's the thing. I will level with you. I poked and touched at things like transhumanism, future corporations, right? These are popular topics that honestly I feel have been muddied. I'm a normie sci-fi fan, right? I don't much care for media literacy other than it being a really interesting dog whistle. If you're someone that says you have it, usually that indicates you're pretty low IQ. Most of us read between the lines and we get the richness of messaging that's woven into writing. But again, personally, as I get older and my library gets more full and there's just more choices, it becomes harder and harder to kind of invest into a topic that often is just really heavy-handed and poorly done. And dare I say, it's a risk that maybe a lot of us normies just aren't really worth taking. Not that my sensibilities are going to be hurt or anything like that, but it's more like, do I want to give this game a couple of hours and see if it's going to preach to me in a heavy-handed fashion? Or do I in turn, play some more Battlestar Galactica Deadlock? Which, by the way, is great. I installed it yesterday, played a chunk, I want to play some more. It becomes kind of simple math. And I think some people that are a bit more terminally online and invested in all of this stuff, maybe in a personal manner, overlook that the dudes with the wallets were kind of just getting worn out on some of these topics because often they're handled so poorly. Transhumanism as an example, and of course, being Australian, being laws and shit around trans stuff. I'll delicately dance around this, but there are two different things there. They're actually kind of totally separate issues. One is a dysmorphia of the mind, and one is the idea of upgrading bits and pieces of your body to perform more. Like, to me, there's a black and white difference between the two, and yet often they're co-opted and put together and smushed together. But at the end of the day, the normie gamer with the pay packet is only really interested in paying for one of those and not interested in the other. Early on in this game, you meet a doctor. They're clearly, non-binary, because being that this is all text-based, the game goes out of its way to refer to this person as there, they, all of that sort of stuff, which infuriates me when you're talking in the singular. This is more performative and tick-boxy than something that actually adds value to your world, or more specifically, me as a player. And here's the thing, me telling you that, maybe you're interested in it, but there's a lot of people that are just going to go, I'm not going to buy this. They're not going to lose any sleep about it or anything like that. They're just going to be informed. They're going to know that there's some performative nonsense in here that chooses to wield the English language incorrectly to prove a point, or however you want to put it. But the point is, they just close the book. They move on. They go somewhere else. Cope, seethe, do whatever you want. But I'll never understand why it's so important for someone to torpedo their own project by putting this stuff in there. Anyway, look, I don't mean to turn this into a tirade on these topics, but perhaps it offers insight to those that are vehemently all in and they can't understand why their media literate games don't get the success that they deserve. And I'm just giving you a handshake from across the aisle and telling you that a lot of us that grew up on interesting sci-fi topics, things like Star Trek Next Generation, for example, we're just kind of fed up with the dilution of the market in general. And look, this might be spectacular, 10 out of 10 by the end of it, who can really say? But I feel that, I do actually represent a non-insignificant part of the player base that just quietly goes and plays something else that's a safer bet for spending an evening after work. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.